like to call to order the Wednesday 19th, 2023 meeting of the Tenino Planning Commission. Let the record show that all commissioners are present with the exception of Alex Murray. It's unexcused. Okay, let's see. This is a special meeting, so take a look at the agenda. Doesn't seem like it's as special as it was originally going to be, but it's on a different day. So let's look at this agenda and see what we can do. I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, let's take a look at the minutes. I don't think they're maybe included in this packet, but they were online. I don't know. You guys had a chance to look at them?
Right here, I think it's in here, maybe.
Okay.
I looked at it online, so
Okay.
I'm good with the minutes as presented.
Motion to approve the minutes is presented.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Okay, moving on. International, what is it? Internation? Is that correct? International Wildland Urban Interface Code. That's fun. So.
There's Alex.
Made it. Nice. Is this supposed to be under unfinished business or?
No, I think this one's just informational.
Okay.
So we can chat it real quick about it.
Yeah.
The Washington State Legislature has adopted the International Council Code for construction, the 2021 codes. As part of those codes, you'll see are there a few of these to hand out?
I think I got it on.
There we go.
Anyways, the part of the code package that was accepted by the Washington State Building Council was a wildlife urban interface code, which they've mapped the entire state. And what they've done when they've mapped it is they show areas where there's enough vegetation and urban structures that should there be a wildfire, that there would be this conflict between just letting it burn and putting it out because you have structures. So I guess it wouldn't be a conflict, it just would be a challenge. So they mapped the state and they've highlighted certain areas like Tenino that have a high, both a high proximity to timber and trees and structures. And the reason that that's a thing is because the building code requires a few additional things for new or remodeled structures that happen after the effective date of this wildlife urban interface code. So specifically, I'll read this thing and I'm going to pass it around real quick. What's new is ventilation openings such as crawl space and attic openings can't exceed 144 square inches per vent. They've got to have metal mesh over them and have to prevent flame or embers from entering the structure. And there's requirements on attic ventilations. There's requirements for exterior wall construction options for a 1 hour rated heavy timber or fire retardant treated materials. So what that typically is it's like additional drywall or other fire resistant siding. They have to have Class A roofing and valley flashing if applicable needs to be metal. So that's to prevent embers from entering into like a cedar shake, for example, ends up catching fire pretty quick.
Tell me what Class A, I can look it up.
I don't know what Class A roofing is. I'm guessing it's probably asphalt, like a certain type of asphalt.
Like RBC for the most part around here.
Yeah. And then there's some deck material options, including heavy timber has to be approved. And decks less than 48 inches above finished grade shall be enclosed with a screen material from grade to the underside of the joist. So there's and those are just some of the construction aspects. I also believe there's some setback requirements for setbacks from side yards and rear yards, even for accessory structures. So it was supposed to be beginning on July 1st was the effective date. That has now been pushed to the end of October. And so we've got the city's building official is aware of it, Shane's looking into it, and, the mayor has sent a request to the county and, TRPC, and who else did he send? He sent an email saying, you know, what's the deal with this? We think we might have been mapped incorrectly, because the entirety of the city is in like the red zone, which is like the high risk zone. Most of the surrounding communities to the north don't have that same mapping, and I looked at a map in Sumner last weekend, and they've got certain areas like on the side slopes, but their town isn't. And so Wayne's not real sure why we picked up a high volatility, you know, fuel rating here in the middle of town.
I kind of have the same question, because it doesn't seem like we're, when you see.
Yeah,
these
you wanna
big
show that real
communities
quick?
that are
Yeah.
spread out,
That's a really,
So
thanks for-
here's
Oh, wow.
the DNR mapping,
Oh,
and they actually, there's a link that's really interesting, so DNR prepared this explanation for the wildland urban interface, and they talk about, so the red areas on the map are areas where more than 50% of the coverage is some kind of burnable wildlands cover, and
oh,
this is clearly mapped across your downtown.
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
and along the railroad tracks.
Yeah, so
Also
there's maybe an error here.
Can we like zoom out and show you see the next red?
Yeah.
yeah, you wanna,
Seems
yeah,
like we're the only, they just circled the city of Tenino, and maybe they're all red.
so I think
there's
Rainier,
Tenino.
Rainier's downtown's like that as well.
And I'm happy to pass this around if folks want to take a closer look
I
themselves,
can get online.
but or maybe we can send a link out.
Yeah, so.
And the yellow areas, so this is like computer generated somehow? or
Yeah,
The
and then-
yellow areas have like high enough population or close enough to?
No, the color on this mapping aren't necessarily what I would choose. Green is the wildlands, and
Uh-huh.
red is green is wildlands, gray is urban, red is wildland urban's interface, and orange yellow is called intermix,
Right.
where there's just like a lot less definition.
Okay.
We're surrounded by yellow, which.
So I don't-
And what colors are subject to this new rule?
Red.
The red.
Red.
Only
Yeah,
the red.
So the red is what's called the interface. That's the kind of the term what we're looking at. And so there don't appear to be any fire insurance requirements or sprinkler requirements. But it is some fire resistivity and some setback things that we were seeing. So I think mostly it's a matter of determining whether the maps are correct. I mean, in concept, this is good, right? I mean, places that have never caught on fire are starting to catch on fire, right? And sprinkling homes and fire resistivity of homes is good. But the mayor asked the building official, what could this potentially cause relating to, increased price for construction? And the building official said roughly $25,000 to $30,000 of additional costs for a new home because of fire resistivity requirements.
And it's hard when, like, we keep hearing the cry for affordable housing, but yet we keep making housing less affordable.
And it's probably not much less for a small house versus a big house to do.
Do you think it will, but it will probably raise your insurance rates at some point in the future if you don't have the upgrades and you're in
That's
this
what's
red
gonna go.
zone?
That
Eventually.
would not surprise me. But I don't know.
That sucks. All right.
So that was just a discussion item related to something we're seeing. We haven't made any adjustments to the code yet.
Will we have to wait will we wait until we get clarification to do that, I
I
guess?
believe that is the intent, and then when the code goes in, if it does in fact go into effect in October and doesn't get bumped again, then we would have to respond to that in code, in our development codes.
You know who it is that has the authority to make those determinations? Is it the DNR?
I believe the Washington Association of Building Officials was the one who had adopted the changes into the ICC.
Mhm.
But DNR is the one that mapped it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, well, they at least have the maps online, so. and everybody can get there. We could send out the link if you wanted, if
Yeah, I
it's
was
just,
being able just to peruse it.
Dave's a former, firefighter guy. So,
Yeah, my wife always asks about that same thing about, you know, 'cause you see it in Rochester, all these, you know, fires are having with, you know, this is gonna happen. I said, I just don't see it happening tonight. It'll be in the big risk you see, you know, some of that.
yeah, I don't know.
There's probably people smarter than me making decisions, you know.
We are in the prairie. It's hot, I guess,
I
and
just
dry.
think it looks too
We don't have a
small.
lot of big open, you know, grassy, where it seems like that's what happens down in Rochester. It's big grassy areas that catch on fire, you know, and spread.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, moving on. Public comment. John, do you want to say anything? No.
No, it's interesting that this has come up.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Any reports from the administration? Are we ready to move past the fire stuff?
Yeah, we're ready to move past the fire stuff. Report-wise, we're trying to work with Public Works to get the city's transportation improvement plan uploaded to the TRPC website and make sure that our projects are all listed. And so that's underway. There's going to be more and more money available for transportation infrastructure. And so I'm working with Troy to get that updated and make sure our projects are competitive for funding in our region. So that would be the only report from there. There is a couple boundary line adjustments that have popped in lately. People wanting to subdivide property and look for, you know, new ability to do lots. I don't know if you've seen what's the townhomes over on State Street here.
I've heard it going on.
So those are starting to look good. There's a couple units going in there. A few.
They're building a house in the other one, right, by the Hope House, or maybe down across from the church.
Correct. Those are a series of duplexes, I believe.
Oh, more than one duplex?
Yeah. How many buildings have gone up? So far?
None. They just cleared this site right now. It's just a normal 60 by 120 lot, I think.
Yeah, that might be a unit and a ADU.
I see. Mm-hmm. All right.
Well, I could report out on our new planner if that's all right, since
Yes.
she's already added value to the meeting. Christina Hayworth joined us a couple months ago and is leading our planning office in Lacey. So Christina, this is the planning commission. You want to tell them a little bit about where you're at, where you came from?
Yeah. So I was previously with a different consulting company, and my family relocated down to Olympia, so I jumped ship and joined SCJ. But I bring a little over 10 years of experience doing all kinds of things planning, so that includes a lot of different kinds of development review, everything from really, really simple stuff to really complicated stuff. Feasibility studies, long-range planning, so comprehensive plans. I had, which is one of the things we'll talk about tonight. Sub-area plans and other kinds of special planning projects. I do have an interest in hazard mitigation planning, so all this WUI stuff is pretty fascinating for me, and to see how that gets implemented across the board. But I'm really excited to join Team Tenino, and
Nice.
I'm excited to be here tonight.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So are you gonna be continuing meetings, or you just kind of come in as we need information, or what's your role gonna be with us?
Well, Dan and I have been working up a transition plan. The goal is that I will eventually take over for Dan here, but we don't want it to be too much of a shock, and there's a lot of work to get my arms around. Yeah, back at the home office, so it'll be a gentle transition over the next couple of months.
Yeah, that's right. We'll tag team it. I think at new business we'll talk about the comp plan update, and Christina's going to be leading that, so that'll be an easy thing for her to work with you on in the coming year and a half, 2 years as the lead.
Very good.
I might have missed an opportunity tonight. I don't know if I need to add it to the agenda or reports maybe? Maybe,
We're on reports now.
yeah.
Go for
Just
it.
a question I have, I guess, really, is many years ago, when Fred Evander, I don't know if you know him, was our, we did a years-long thing with our downtown planning and how like we should redo our whole downtown. It seemed like it was made and there's never been any look at it again or consideration. I personally would like.
I brought that up several times too. I think it ended up on a shelf.
It's in the comp plan.
Is it in the comp plan? Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was good work, and we're gonna build on that as part of the periodic update. Some of the things that happened as a result of that work were like the painted bulb outs for the,
Mhm.
you know, for example. In the downtown core, you can kind of see paint that kind of in red that kind of goes out, to kind of form a little bit of a pedestrian refuge, if you will, of where
It's like a
people can
traffic
stand as
calming
they
thing too.
walk. Yep, so, yeah, that stuff's in
We
there.
can talk about it more. I have some, yeah. I mean, seems like there's a lot of federal money going out for doing infrastructure projects and it might be a good time. There's some things that we think would be good to see if we can find some, so we can talk about it more in the.
Right, and so when we get to that portion on new business, when we talk about the periodic update for the comp plan, that's kind of the intent today, is to kind of get some early checks on approach and scope as we put the schedule together.
Sounds good. Thanks for indulging me there.
All right, so we don't have any public hearings this month. Are we still on for next month too?
Yes, yes.
In one meeting? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and then unfinished business, RV ordinance. What's that? Well, I mean, I know what it is, but what are we doing with it right now?
So I believe you had in your packet the RV ordinance and the notes that were provided by council. And
Yes.
I was at the meeting where they sent it back to us, and they basically said that we sent it to them with no recommendations.
Yeah.
So they were sending it back to us with no recommendations to make a recommendation to them.
that's right.
And I've been to several meetings and, provided what we talked about. It seemed like, some people got feedback from the community. They think allowing this is gonna designate homeless, which I totally disagree with. And I basically told them that, you know, this isn't about homeless people camping forever on somebody's, you know, as it is now, somebody could park an RV on our right of way and we don't have much say about it, with some of the laws that have been passed in the federal, rulings. So they've made it, in my opinion, to something that's worse than what we have now. I mean, they want you to have a permit to stay there for more than 15 days. Only allows 1 15-day, more 15-day extension versus a month or 2 months, what we talked about. And so, I mean, if somebody's gonna stay 15 days more, they're never gonna get pushed off their lot before, you know. It makes no sense to me to even move forward with it, with the wording they put in there.
Oh.
But that's just my opinion, but I'm kind of passionate about what I put forward, so. I'd be curious to hear what other.
We did vote on it though, right?
Yeah.
I specifically remember voting on it, something.
You voted to send it on to the council
We didn't
for
say-
consideration, but there was no
But we didn't say-
formal vote to
We
recommend
suggest
approval.
we recommend it, I see.
Correct.
That's what we didn't do.
Well,
I got you.
think
Because it was
that's
a-
what I had been-
Yeah, so that is, I agree with what Matthew's saying, and Dave, that's what the council is seeking, is a actual voted on recommendation from the planning commission to amend the language, which is something that only they can do, is, you know, to amend the language.
So I make a motion to recommend that it be not approved as amended, personally. That's my opinion. I don't think it does this. What I was thinking about doing when we put this together, because I think it makes it worse for people that wanna stay a little longer.
Pretty much all we need to do is just decide if we wanna send it back to them with a recommendation. If we don't send it back to them with a recommendation, it's kinda just dead, right?
Is it?
Yeah,
Cause they're not gonna take any action on it.
Yeah.
No.
yeah, 'cause you can't make a motion to not do something.
Correct.
You can only make a motion to do something.
Right, so I would suggest that if the planning commission wishes to send an RV ordinance to the council, that you revise the language to say,
To the way we
say
like.
what you want it to say, vote on that and send that
With a recommendation.
with a recommendation to approve as sent, and then it's up to the council to either take that recommendation and the language and approve it, or to modify it, or to deny it altogether. Those are the three choices.
Yeah, so like, they send it back with 30 and 15 days, but we don't have to send it like that. We can
Right.
change it to however we believe it should be.
I can check with my discussion, but I don't think they'll accept what we originally, I mean, we want to try to compromise in there someplace, but I would just, not even send it back to them then, just say, we'll deal with it later. They're very, yeah. Surprising how controversial it was. I mean, they talked about the same things over 3 or 4 meetings, and the same issues came up about the homeless. You know, we're just gonna attract homeless people, and to me, things that weren't even related to what the whole discussion
I
we
mean,
had.
I think the first impression that comes to most people when you say you wanna let people live in their RVs, just in general, are negative things, probably. I mean, not to say that where you're coming from with your idea is like it's a good idea and it makes sense,
And I
but
would
like,
say-
there's like a gut reaction that
Yeah.
people have, like, no, not that, kind of thing.
And that's even more so in the last 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Like, as we've seen the derelict RV crisis and the vagrants and the, you know what I'm saying? Which is too bad, because as we were discussing this, my thought was grandma and grandpa come up from California for a week to visit their kids and their grandkids. Or not a week, I mean, you know, a summer, right? I mean, so.
Vagrants aren't gonna use somebody's side yard to just park their RV in the side yard, but again, like you said, that was,
Yeah, if it's gonna be, I mean, if they don't wanna see it the way that we said it and they want this language, right now, we all know that anyone can live in their RV anywhere in town.
they're doing it.
And
all
nobody's
over
gonna
the place.
bother them, and nobody's gonna say anything, because they're already doing it, and there's no enforcement keep you from doing it. And they're saying they want this, but who's gonna like voluntarily go and pay however much
For 15 days.
for 15 days when
And $50
everybody,
a month.
it's just gonna be good guys who end up paying money for permits, and nobody else is gonna do it, and it will not get enforced.
Makes no sense
And
to me.
so just doing anything, if they're already taking a contentious stand on it, I mean,
Well, they were
it's
saying
maybe
a month or
pointless,
something, or a
kind of.
month and a half versus 3 months, so I would say, okay, maybe we can wiggle something in. for
Good try.
15 days, I don't think it's worth it.
You can change it to be a month and a half,
There,
or you can send it if you
They,
want.
yeah. Just my impression from being there, they are just very set against it's gonna attract homeless people, and we're just gonna run the whole town down by doing this, so that's my impression from being there a couple meetings where it was.
But the law, the way the law is, you can't kick people who are sleeping on the side of the road out anyway, right, in their RVs. That's the
my
whole thing
understanding.
going
That's
on
what that whole Boise
all over the
decision
place.
was about, yeah, unless you offer them a place to live.
So,
But who's to say we can't at least like try this to get it out there and then maybe come back to it and extend the time later?
It's up to you guys.
Yeah, I think if the, so like, what we're really doing is being proactive in the long stretch. Because, like, there's homeless everywhere, and there's obviously a homelessness crisis, and that goes into all the politics. But if we're preemptive in how the process is, then we're kind of being proactive in preventing or discouraging it, because there's never going to be a true prevention. So if we do something, I feel like it's better than what we have, which is you can't do it all.
15 days or whatever is what we have to say.
So it's like, I don't think that doing just another 15 days makes sense, because I don't think it makes sense to charge someone 15 days when, like you said, at that point it's truly someone coming into town for 2 weeks. Like, it's not even a temporary thing, it's more of like a at the sleight of hand, like that's the weird terminology, but it's like not actually purposeful use, in my opinion. But if it's over 15 or even 30 days, then it's more like, that's where I feel like it crosses into that like temporary housing or temporary use while you wait to build a house or whatever you're using it for. So I guess prohibited. But if it's over 15 days, then I feel like there should be some sort of permitting process, just so, even if it's getting a handle of what's happening in town, if that makes sense.
Cause that might prevent people from staying 15 days
Yeah.
or longer than 15 days, cause then they have to get the permit.
Yeah.
That's my
But
concern, if it's only 15
won't
days.
someone have to go around and, you know, mark the tires or something like that, which we don't have that
Yeah.
capacity, it didn't seem like so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and technically, it's not saying that you can't have an RV on your property. It's just saying that someone can't be living in there. So like, I think that's also a weird statement.
That's
point.
Yes,
That's my
exactly.
whole argument. We got RVs sitting around all over the place,
Yeah.
and they could be living in it, and nobody would even know the difference.
That's correct, that's correct.
I think the people that are gonna be looking out is maybe like the neighbors that don't like the
See,
view
yeah.
or
And
seeing
that's what
it
you
and-
want, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, in a way, you want self-policing as much as possible, cause that saves us positions. I would say, like, if we're gonna send this back, we should really go through and kind of try to get back to what we see it being the best as. We might be able to find some like compromise in here, but if we're gonna send something for, you know, to council, it should be something we're feeling pretty strong about. And then I think if we decide to do that, we just make a very, clear, you know, suggestion or whatever, recommendation on it, right?
Is there
Maybe
any
somebody
way,
more articulate than me needs to go talk to him, because
do we have wording in this where it's like if it's a clear traveler just passing through and staying, you know, this follows it, but if we know it's like homeless, then we take a different approach?
I
I
don't think you
can't
can
take
do
it
that.
approach though, cause you can't control it, I mean, it's against the law. Basically try to kick somebody out and make them move. Homeless is a totally different issue, I think it needs to be dealt with in a totally different way if we wanna talk about homelessness.
Well, I think this specifically talks about individuals' own property. So like, in theory, someone's not going to live on your property without your permission. So that like homeless would live in like the city park or like in the Dave's parking lot or like the post office parking lot. They would live in like more vacant areas, not necessarily like your like side yard.
Have you ever been on MacArthur Street South? There's a certain property on that street
Yeah.
where it's been known.
Yeah. And there are RVs like that are in the city right away that are occupied, for sure. So what would be better? 15 days, I think we can all agree is kind of like a vacation, so
Yeah.
do you wanna, would we say start the permitting if you're gonna stay longer than 30 days? Just
I'd
raise
say
that number
month.
first,
A
or?
month would be a minimum to me, that makes sense to start talking about it, making somebody pay extra and, you know, I don't know what they would say about the permitting fee, but,
I mean, it's all gonna be based on complaints, and so there will be no enforcement of this unless the neighbors like, it's getting really junky over there, I better
Yeah.
call the city. And then at that point, the city will come out and they would have to give them 15 days from that day, I assume, that they come out to begin the clock, unless they somehow knew they were there beforehand or could prove it or something, but, I don't know.
it's weird because I can't,
Yeah, I mean, my general kind of feel, I think one of my biggest concerns is people who have people living in an RV and it's not hooked up to sewer, right? And
That's the grossest, like, potential bad
Situation, right.
negative, yeah.
that's addressed to me.
it is, but, I mean, I think that, so that's why I'm saying that I think that we need an avenue, right? We need an avenue where people can follow the rules and be above board, but then more importantly, this also needs to give us the avenue to correct action that is not above board. Does that make sense?
That's what I think, that was what the whole point of this, is have some kind of enforceable mechanism where they have a permit, so you can say you're not meeting the requirements of this permit. That was the whole kind of behind this, because people are doing it now without a permit, we
Right.
don't even know they're living there.
No, and that would be, I mean, but I guess what I'm saying is like sometimes I think we can, you know, sometimes we can get into the weeds with this of details, but really what it is create an avenue that allows people to be above board and play by the rules. And then the people who don't wanna be above board and play by the rules, give an avenue to correct that action, right? Which right now, we don't have a corrective action in place. I mean, I know that the city has has,
They would-
levied fees, daily fees and stuff, right?
The person would have to be being a nuisance in some way in order to kick all that in, though, I feel like, probably.
Right.
Well, the city operates on a complaint basis, not a proactive, enforcement basis. So
Which to me
when
makes
Rainey
sense.
gets a complaint that
Then
someone's
he-
living in an RV, he'll go out there and check it, and if they're living in the RV, he'll tag it and say, you gotta move it. If they don't move it, then they start working through the process to get rid
And I
of
guess
it.
what I'm saying about an avenue to take care of it, yeah, I don't even necessarily, I don't want shouldn't be adding employees to be like RV police.
Yeah.
No, but just like when the situation arises, to have the
Right.
ability
Absolutely.
to
You can go
mitigate.
back on it.
Yeah.
Well, I even mentioned the whole thing, the whole idea behind this, on our original proposal, gave the council total control. They could say that, I told them can be a temporary thing that only lasts for 6 months and we review it. They could technically say we're only gonna allow one RV in the city to do it, That was my whole point, is let's try it on a small basis, and if it's not working, we can make adjustments. And that was totally, which just makes sense to me. Why not do it on a temporary basis and allow 2 or 3 or whatever they think they can handle and see how it works? If it doesn't work, cancel the whole thing and say it's not working. That doesn't seem too complicated to me, but it went way away from that. There was no consideration of the whole, you can control how many, how long you want to do this.
I think that's what they want us to do,
We did that. That was in the
Yeah.
original proposal.
but maybe it
So-
wasn't like the right number of days, maybe it was just too long for them, so in order for us to get this out there, maybe shorten it.
Yeah.
So my thinking, and I'll figure out exactly how to put it. So, hearing everyone, one, we think anything less than 15 days doesn't make sense. But if we do it after 15 days, then there's that 15-day period where we can't really say, you've been here for 15 days, you need to pay a permit today. So my thinking is, at day 0, you have to have a permit, but from day 0 to 15, it costs $0. Because that starts the clock, but then also makes you recognize that you have to have a permit, or you're breaking law.
Now, is that once the person has been recognized living in the RV?
Technically, it's supposed to be day 0. So it's supposed to be the
You
day
have to
you
self-report.
So,
Yes.
yeah,
But really, it's an enforcement tactic, because if you call and say that you're living in, or your neighbor's living in an RV, and I show up and say, you're living in an RV, have you been here for 15 days? They're obviously not going to say no, or they're obviously not going to be like, yes, I'm actually living here over the estimated time I have to get a permit. But because there is a rule that you have to, from day 0 to day 15, you have to have some sort of voluntary permit. And I don't know that makes sense for the city to make it $0 because there's administrative fees on everything. But if it's $0, then it sets that precedent that they need to do something to continue living in their trailer. And then at day 15 is when all of this normal stuff actually starts, but that allows the city to tell that individual that they need to do something to continue living in there. And then kind of puts them on record saying that at day 15, you either need to not be living in your trailer, or you need to pay this $50, which I personally think should extend another 30 days. And then at 45 days, then they have one more extension possible of 30 days. And then after that, that's like the normal stop. But if we get to, what was that, 75 days, so 2 months and some change, then the city administration has authority to make exceptions on premise that those individuals are making good faith effort to have a different solution, or has a solution, making sure that it's not becoming derelict vessel.
too is, even if Rainey shows up on day 20 because of a complaint, they're not gonna say they've been there for 20 days, but day 0 starts on day 20. And now all of a sudden you're looking at a 35-day stay instead of an indefinite stay. Does that make sense? But at day 20, that's, okay, now you're on the radar.
Yeah.
You have 15 days from that day to, I mean, I'm just saying, right now we see an RV and we just start serving notices, and we just keep serving notices every day, building up this bill that they're never gonna pay as long as they live in their house. I don't even know if the city's gonna take out a lien on their property. You know what I'm saying? But it's just, there's no teeth behind it. I don't know.
It's only gonna be the honest people that do this, the people
Yeah,
that
that's
don't-
what
It always
I
is.
also think.
Well, and it always is, right? I mean,
We're still gonna have people that are gonna do it without getting a
I-
permit. We're just trying to make people that, like was me, when my son needed a place to stay for a little bit while they built their house, I would have gladly come in and paid a permit fee to be honest and let people know what's going on and making sure I met all the rules. But there's, the people that are gonna cheat are gonna cheat, they're not gonna come in and try to,
right.
but I want the honest people to be able to feel like they're doing it the right thing, you know what I mean? That's my whole point. I thought honest people feel like they're doing the right thing.
Yeah, we could put it. We could put that forward. What about at the end though, where you kind of trailed off at the end of your
What happens?
the enforcement part? I mean, I don't know. That's kind of up to the city to figure out.
Yeah.
I guess.
But I do think, because like if you're building a house, like 75 days may or may not be enough.
Yeah, probably not.
But I think truly once you get into the weeds of further than that, then you're no longer going to be able to like truly enforce it, because at some point they're just going to say we're not living in our
Yeah.
RV, or they're going to say we're living in our RV, but we don't really know how long.
There's nowhere else to go.
Yeah. So then, like, if they come and want another permit and they're at 75 days, but their house is 2 weeks to it, or a month, or whatever it is, it's really kind of screwed up for us to be like, nope, sorry, the rules
Well,
75 days.
That
At
would
that point,
building
they
a
can
house
just
would be good
Bring
faith.
their own permit in and just prove that they're,
Yeah.
they are building, and then I think that
Yeah,
is-
we would
Yeah,
know
we
that.
can easily extend that,
Yeah.
that's no big
And I
deal.
think that's like a good figure.
That'd be the easiest scenario.
The code does have a provision for living in a trailer during the construction of your home, and it runs with the building permit.
Oh, okay.
So building
So-
permit, as long as you're making
Valid or whatever.
substantial progress in renewing your building permit during the time frame of that, you're good.
Okay. Also,
But
that problem solved.
but you can't like clear the land and then put your travel trailer up and start living in it and not pull the building permit.
Right.
Maybe the
Throw
city.
one more day a week.
Maybe the city should get an RV dump at the wastewater treatment plant, so people have a place to drive it over there.
Well, I think that, I don't know what the 15-day, where that came from, but I would presume it has something to do with how long your tanks would last before you have to move the trailer and go pump it somewhere and dump it and then come back.
I mean, if you were
That's not
renting
even
space
accurate.
for your RV from a stranger landlord at their residence, you're probably not gonna be able to use their bathroom, I guess. But if you're grandma and grandpa, I assume that they'll let you in to use the bathroom.
Well, there's other options now. It's not just, I mean, I see all those portable tanks they just have hooked up to. When they get full, they just are able to wheel them off and dump them some places. There's options besides looking at the sewer that we're out of it, so.
Well, and
But I like your idea.
you're not necessarily supposed to be using a generator either, so that like kind of deters you from
Good point.
wanting to be there forever. At least it would for me.
And that's not.
Well, they're
Well,
mostly plugged in.
the kicker, Matthew, is that the electrical usage is getting metered and paid for.
Oh.
The sewer is not.
Yeah.
So if you're discharging to somebody's sewer, their grinder and their step system, it's just going in flow because it's a flat rate for sewer.
And there's a rate in there.
Yeah.
I think $50 is way too much, but personally, but I still think with 25, but I guess if they want to try charging 50, I think that just discourages people again from doing the right thing, because I could have 10 people staying in my house and I don't get charged extra for sewer.
I can agree with that, I think having it too high, definitely people would do the wrong thing, but if it's low, it would
Yeah.
encourage them, I'll just pay it.
Yeah, that's why I thought $25 was a fair amount. It's, but I think they changed it to 50 if I remember right. I would
Yeah.
ask to go back to 25 personally.
50 per month.
I'm just a fan of doing anything to add more capacity sewer treatment plant.
It's just,
More ratepayers.
yes, yeah.
again, they can still say they only wanna do this as a trial for 6 months and only allow 5 of them, and
Matthew, are you going to write this up? It seems like you are writing a lot.
we can send it back next month.
So, do you want to do that, and then we'll just
Yeah, we can
talk about it next time?
Yeah, because then I'll get either copy, and then I'll text them.
Yeah, and then we can vote.
But is everyone?
I like what
everyone's
you
supportive
have.
of the 0 to 15 permit required but no cost,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
then at 15 days, 30 more days, but permit required and the cost, and then at 45 days, 30 more. That makes it to 75, and then only with good faith effort that there's like some sort
Some
of
exception.
And we know that there's already something on the books for if you're building a house and you have a building permit, so I think that covers.
And we should make a note to.
They might like
council
that
about
better.
'cause I don't think they even knew that, cause originally when they talked about it, they were gonna just say the only time you can do that is if you're building a house, so it seemed like they weren't even aware that you already have something on the books that allows that, so.
It's the very first item on the ordinance. It's letter A in the text there, so.
Okay.
And like a soft vote. Does everyone support $25? Does everyone support $50? What are people feeling?
I think 25 actually makes some sense.
Yeah, I think it's better to come in low.
It's low enough
to get
to-
people to buy in and start doing it.
We need
and
them
then
to
eventually-
self-register, and we
Yeah.
don't want them to be scared away.
Right, and then we can always reassess, right? But I think 25 is a very low barrier of entry.
So 0 from 0 to 15, 25 from
No,
15 to
No, nothing for 0 to 15.
Oh, so yeah,
But you get like
zero,
you get the permit.
$0 for 0 to 15 days, $25 from 16 to 45.
Yeah.
I would say a little bit.
Yeah, sorry.
I would just say if they wanna hook to the sewer, it should be from the start, if they're gonna be hooking into the sewer, even at day 0, it'd be $25 a month, if they wanna hook into, but maybe if it's only ever only gonna be the 15 days, that doesn't make sense, I don't know.
Yeah, less than
Yeah,
15 days, they're not
now that I think about it, maybe just.
We
say-
just put a paid for, you pay RV dump at the water treatment plant, make that like a flat rate, just come over and dump it there, then the city's making some money on the sewer, I guess.
They got that whole thing, septic receiving chamber there, they should be able to make an easy dump for people to,
Yeah, you would think. I don't know.
that's a good idea, actually. Yeah.
Well, when we send this back, we can make a secondary recommendation that the city looks into the feasibility of having an RV dump.
So, but
Yeah.
you need to come and present this to the council too, because I don't really listen to you. You're much more articulated than I am.
So I think we're good with that for now.
So,
I will come back with something for next.
Nice.
thank you.
Okay.
So that would be probably after the 2 public hearings then, so, in the August meeting.
That's okay, there's no real hurry. I was hoping to get it done by the summer when a lot of people were traveling and stuff, but now it's, yeah. People are gonna do it anyway. Right.
It's going to be our best version of this idea, I think. And so we'll see what they say. If they
Yeah,
don't like it,
they're
then-
gonna look at it and they're gonna be like, this is amazing. So glad we sent this back to them.
They'll be like, throw that shit.
Like I thought we already voted against it. All right. Well, we'll see what happens. I like it. Okay. So new business comp plan update. Are you going to talk about that, Christine?
I sure am.
Excellent.
Okay, this, okay. Are we trying to connect me, or are you just gonna share the presentation? Oh, hey.
Not now.
can't click never on the one.
Yeah.
How long can I put off required updates?
They don't want to give you that much power.
I know.
All right, so let's talk comp plans. Next slide, please. All right, so Tenino is required to have a comprehensive plan, and you guys are on the 2025 update cycle. So that means that your comprehensive plan is going to need to be adopted and updated by June 30th of 2025. So we've got a little less than 2 years to get there. Comp plans are required by the Growth Management Act to include a total of 8 required elements. And as part of this work, there's been some recent changes related to climate and housing from the legislative session this year. We need to confirm whether those things are applicable. My initial read through is that you're not gonna have to talk about any of the climate or new housing legislation for a community of your size, but that's something that we're aware of and that we know that we're gonna need to dive into. For your comp plan, we're also gonna need to coordinate pretty closely with Thurston County and some other agencies. So I'm sure you know that part of the comprehensive planning process is figuring out how you're gonna accommodate some growth projections related to housing units and related to jobs. So we're gonna be working with Thurston County to figure out what that looks like for Tenino. There's also some coordination with other agencies that we're gonna be doing. And we're gonna be conducting some really cool public participation, hopefully. That's one of the things that I'm most passionate about. And then as an implementation action, we're also gonna be looking at some updates to your development code so that we can implement all of our shiny new goals and policies. So I provided a scope of work. Dan, did that get circulated?
Not the
Okay.
actual budgetary one.
Okay, cool. All right, well, one thing before we dive into the scope of work. So the city is allocated a total of $100,000 by the Department of Commerce to take care of this work. So we'll talk through my suggested scope of work and the subtasks that are part of that, but know that this is all gonna fit into that $100,000 budget. And there may be some points where we're relying on Planning Commission to help with some public outreach. This is actually a really great venue to use for some public engagement in particular. So we'll talk about where you guys can really support the process. And then I heard some concerns about the implementation of your downtown plan, so I'm gonna sneak in a little bit of implementation stuff when we get to that part of the scope. All right, so phase 1 that's an ongoing project management administration coordination phase, invoicing progress reports. That one's the boring phase. Where we really start to get into the interesting stuff is phase 2, where we're looking at the background information. So this is where we're doing a little bit of research on what's been going on in your community, what your current documents are, what the demographic trends have been since the last time you guys did a comp plan update. The Growth Management Act, not the Growth Management Act, the Department of Commerce also put together some really cool tools, including a GMA checklist so that we can evaluate your existing plan, and that's gonna form the basis for what our update needs to look like. This is also where I'm suggesting we consider a community visioning process. This community vision statement is kind of like the idea for what your community will look like in about 20 years, the planning horizon, about 20 years time. And that is the basis for all of the goals and policies that will take you from where you're at right now to where you wanna be in 20 years. And it can be a really exciting way to get an understanding of what your community thinks it wants to be, what some of the priorities are, and what the values of the people that live and work here are. So that will set us up for understanding what we need to do when we tackle the comp plan update. And phase 3 is where we'll really dive into that work. So the subtasks here are putting together a draft plan. We'll use the information that we got from phase 2, all of the demographic information and understanding of the existing policy environment, the got it from that GMA checklist and the community visioning outcomes to put together an initial draft that we're gonna be using for public review. And the draft plan is really where you guys are gonna have a lot of opportunity to help craft what that looks like. So each element has goals and policies that we'll be able to talk about in your meetings here, and talk about how we can craft those to get to the community vision in a way that really makes sense for Tenino. So we're going to be relying pretty heavily on your guidance, and we'll be providing some information to sideboard it based on what requirements there are from the state and from Thurston County and kind of the other broader regulations. But I think that this is where you guys are going to have a lot of control over what this plan is going to look like and where we're going to be relying on you guys pretty heavily. We also have some subtasks in here for some agency coordination, environmental review, and then here's also where we get to the implementation strategy. So I heard some concerns about how your downtown plan was, it was like this great and wonderful process, and then it sat on a shelf and didn't really get to realize it. And one of the things that I would really like to do is put together an incremental implementation strategy. And that starts with some really short-term actions that would need to be completed over the next, say, year to start moving the plan forward. And then each year, the next set of actions would become that year's docket, basically, for implementation strategy. And that can be a little more formal, kind of like a capital improvements plan for any of you that have reviewed that part of your current comprehensive plan, where it can start to look at potential funding sources, or it can be a little bit less formal depending on what level of detail we think is appropriate when we get into that phase of work. But having that really clear implementation strategy is going to give you the roadmap that you need to start working with the plan on a more regular basis and make it part of decision making in Tenino. So it's not just a sit on the shelf document, it's really a guidebook for development in the city. Once we've got all of those pieces done, we'll finalize the comprehensive plan, and that goes off to City Council for approval, and then it gets certified by the Department of Commerce, and we can dive into the development regulations update, which we've moved to phase 5. So sorry, this is a little bit out of order. Development regulations appears in phase 5. We'll talk about that in a minute. All right, so phase 4, I grouped all of the public engagement and adoption work together. Public engagement is going to run from basically the visioning part all the way through the end of this process. We're always going to be welcoming public comments. We do want to have some very intentional engagement events that happen. So beginning with the kickoff of the visioning process, we also want to have opportunities for members of the public to speak to the things that they really care about in this plan. So we're going to be putting together a public participation plan that guides what that looks like. That's subtask number 1. We're imagining the use of some online digital platforms. That's a really great way to reach a lot of people pretty quickly, but we know that that's not going to reach everyone, so we're going to look at some other opportunities for some in-person events, some survey stuff, and I mentioned earlier ways to use these meetings to also get feedback on the process and the potential goals and policies that we're considering and the implementation actions that would come out of that. The Planning Commission meetings, so this is where all of your process appears in this phase, and so we're envisioning basically monthly meetings over the next, starting in 2024, to work through each of these elements, and that gives us a little bit of flexibility in case a meeting needs to be canceled or there's no quorum or whatever situation arises, and that's a pretty comfortable pace, I think, and that'll let us dive deep into each of the topics in the different elements. And then finally, the adoption process. So that's the City Council process. Once you are happy with where the draft is at and want to recommend approval to City Council. And then we included in the last phase, phase 5, the development regulations review and implementation. So part of the GMA checklist is to review the regulations. That'll give us kind of a skeleton overview of what we need to update, and this will be working through those actual updates to finalize some code amendments for you guys. The schedule on the next slide. Thank you so much. The schedule on the next slide is an early draft, and it's pretty simple, and we can talk about this in a little bit more detail, but this is how I'm envisioning pacing this project. So we would have a kickoff meeting with city staff starting in August, and then really start to review the background information and audit the plan in August and September. And that would lead into visioning this fall. And then we would have an initial project meeting with you towards the end of fall, sometime in November, maybe early December, to present the initial findings from our background review phase and the visioning process. And then beginning next year is when we start to dive into each of those elements. So with that, that's pretty much an overview of where I think I'm going to be taking you guys over the next almost 2 years. What questions do you have for me?
So who's doing the visioning portion?
That's part of the scope of work. Yeah. So
That's you guys doing that. On the back end.
We're going to be using a visioning process with the community. It'll be a public engagement effort. We'll put together the plan for what that looks like. We may request some support from you guys, whether that looks like pushing information out to your networks here in town, or if it looks like maybe attending an event. So we'll need to flesh out exactly what that process looks like, but we'll be leading it.
So the visioning stuff in the comp plan is mostly in the plan and concepts for downtown Tenino. There's visioning language in there. For example, the vision behind each of these downtown concepts is the creation of a vibrant, pedestrian-oriented business district that respects and builds on the historic character of downtown Tenino. So sometimes you'll see a vision statement that is all-encompassing and just says, the city of Washtenaw wants to be a place where in 2045 people can walk to work and bike to school and have a variety of services. I mean, so it's like a comprehensive vision statement. The way Tenino's is put together is more of a downtown vision, because when Fred did the downtown plan, that's where he spent most of the focus. And I think that's perfectly appropriate. So part of our assessment will be to determine whether that stuff still rings true, and so we'll be kind of vetting that with you. And if it doesn't, then we can reset that and make it more broad, and not just maybe not just focused entirely on the downtown. But I get a sense just in looking at this plan that most of this stuff is still pretty consistent. You know, what I've heard from the Planning Commission and the council in the past is an interest in retaining the small town feel of Tenino, or the walkability of Tenino, the interest in protecting it from franchises and big boxes in particular, and wanting to make sure that there are opportunities in the downtown core for commercial retail and even industrial uses. So I think that's probably still accurate. There's visions in here for on-street and side street parkings and alley usage. We've talked about that before. And mixed use and interest in having more residential infill at the downtown core. So we'll vet all that stuff through the initial process and then start bouncing that off of you. I think we envision that the Planning Commission will be the primary conduit for our early work, and then we may add some other people in through, whether they're business owners or real estate or chamber or larger employers in town, school district employees, whatever. I think we'll kind of look through and see what that looks like as far as the right mix of people in here, because you will have other business. You don't want to spend every single commission meeting dealing with comp plan, then you've got some other stuff to do as well. So
Yeah, my idea is to have regular touches, but not an overwhelming volume of work to do at each meeting.
I'm curious how much you think has to truly be updated and how much is just like transferring and changing dates and things like that. Like, obviously, like, the idea of duplexes and things like that weren't as like prominent 20, 15, 10 years ago. So like that might be something that like those laws have changed, so we should update that. But I'm curious how much you think is just like truly transferring and updating like dates and things.
You know, I think that it's gonna depend a little bit on your direction and the direction that we get from city council, because it could be a pretty tight update. I mean, to hit the regulatory requirements, it could be tight. If you want to do more than that, if you want to take the opportunity to polish up some of your policies, and allow, or at least talk about how you would allow other kinds of housing, or other like development patterns, then it could be a bigger update. If you want to pull in some of the new legislative requirements that they might not be required for Tenino, but if that's something that you want to explore, then that also is a little bit bigger update. So I think it'll be a little bit up to the direction that you guys want to take it, and the feedback that we get from city council when we have a kickoff meeting with them.
That makes sense.
The comp plan's from 2016, so it's not that old. We're working on a comp plan in McCleary that's from like 2007, so that's got a substantial update. There was a whole host of things that weren't around back then.
And how long will this one last? Because I know it's like
It's a 20-year document.
But it's on a 10-year update cycle, so you'll
Right.
see it, and you do have an opportunity to update annually. You don't have to update it annually. At a minimum, you'll have to update it every 10 years.
It's not allowed to be updated more frequently than once a year.
How is McCleary so old, out of curiosity?
Because they are partially planning under GMA, they don't have to update their plan. They don't want to, because they're not part of the Growth Management Act.
I see.
So their plan is different than GMA counties and cities.
Okay.
But I mean, again, just from doing this for 3 or 4 years with you guys, I think your comp plan is still fairly reflective of what's going on. We just are wrapping up the housing action plan, which will go through public hearing in August. And there's a lot of guts in there that'll just roll right into the housing element.
Yep.
So I do think part of the discussion, what we will be seeking at the kickoff is an understanding from the planning commission, the council, and the community about where you want to apply your effort. So we have $100,000 from Commerce Department to do these updates, and how do you want to allocate that across the workflow for the next 1.5 or 2 years. Your codes are probably not as good as your comp plan. I think your codes are we just spent some time going through your RV language and tried to suss that out. I think your codes are a lot more choppy than they should be, because it's been Frankenstein together over time. So, and it
right.
doesn't, the short plats and boundary line adjustment. I mean, John's gone through some development, and it's not very clear how all that flow works, because the codes are pretty choppy. So, I mean, be aware of that, and perhaps there's maybe a little bit more you could allocate to the development side on the codes, because that is included.
So we could spend more money cleaning that up. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so for example, remember in the housing action plan, we talked about ways to incentivize development in the city. There's no impact fees, so we can't waive impact fees like you could do other places, and it's already pretty straightforward as far as like the regulatory and bureaucratic burden. There's not like 12 departments you have to get signatures for. They're all in one building. But we talked about SEPA thresholds, right? That currently you need a SEPA checklist and the whole process associated with that for anything larger than 4 lots, a 4-lot subdivision, or a 5,000 square foot commercial structure. You are required to do Yelm, their SEPA threshold is 12 lots. So if you do a 12-lot subdivision, you don't have to do SEPA still.
Would you
Which
say
I think is
our-
too high, but,
I mean, yeah.
but.
Would you say our threshold was 4?
Mhm.
That's the
That's the-
minimum
that's
in
the
state
norm.
law. But we could look at options to raise that
Right.
threshold and Dan mentioned the commercial, there's some other thresholds that could be raised too.
Cubic square, like, clearing and grading is another thing. That's where there's a quantity in there. I think it's 5,000 cubic yards of clearing and grading, or 50.
It's 500.
500,
It's
yeah.
small.
So, yeah, there's a variety of things in there
It's not
that
very
you
big.
could look at. And so I think, just keep that in mind. If there are, again, with ADUs and mixed use and infill and duplexes and all these other things, there's sections in the code that are silent on those new approaches and alternatives.
But I would say that we probably need to get a sense of where effort should be spent.
Correct.
Because we're gonna be beholden to the grant scope with Commerce.
Right, and Commerce requires, and you didn't have the budget in front of you, but Commerce requires the final deliverable to have 20% of the overall grant. So 20 grand has to be whatever that last phase is, because they're trying to like handcuff
Yeah.
you, and I'm sure they
They're trying to
learned,
direct you.
they learned that the hard way, where they gave all the money to somebody and then they never got a
They
product.
know nothing what they want.
Right, so they hold back at least 20% until they get that final deliverable. So if phase 5, for example, the development regulation is gonna have to be at least $20,000, which is, not that much.
Or we make the comprehensive plan the last
Right, we
phase.
move these things
We could
around,
just
but,
change it.
but there are, to your point, was that,
Yeah.
the Commerce grant kind of ties our hands. You can get it changed, but it sort of ties your hands on what you're allowed to spend money on. Some places have also allocated additional general fund dollars towards the comp plan or development regulation updates. But I don't think that that's the plan here in Tenino. But
No, I'm trying to wrap my mind around it. But like, what is that money being spent on? Like, obviously, like, outreach is expensive, like mailers, things like that, developing
staff time,
surveys, things like
Yeah.
that.
it's,
Big labor costs,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so most places are hiring consultants to do the work, because they don't have enough staff to take this on top of everything else they're doing in most places. So like if we weren't here and we weren't your planners, that would fall on Jen and Rana, and Courtney and the mayor to write, and that's not realistic.
No. So a lot of it is going to like you guys actually developing this.
Correct.
Yep.
Yep. So yeah, there's not a lot of hard costs in the production, because it's paper and shoe leather, walking the streets to do stuff. Otherwise it's really just staff soft costs for
Yeah.
labor.
But you will see interim deliverables, so you'll see a demographics report when we've prepared that. You'll see the GMA checklist and our recommendations for updates based on that. So you're gonna see stuff come out before we're just like, okay, here's the plan.
Yeah, I guess do you have a sense on anything that's kind of a big change that we're gonna be required, just kind of a general, is there big things that are gonna require some?
So there were, let me make sure that I'm giving you the right information. So right now, your plan has 6 of the required elements. There are a total of 8 elements, so we're gonna need to be putting together an economic development and a parks and recreation element. So those will probably be significant changes, just because they'll be brand new. There's nothing that will be updating, will be created from scratch.
That we could add other, is like the energy efficiency thing, is that another element that we could add, that even if we're not required to? Is
Yeah,
that an element?
you could add, so are you speaking to the climate change
Climate
stuff
change,
that's been
yeah.
happening? Yeah, so you could add a climate change element if you wanted to, and that's something that we could
don't think it's
include.
required at this point.
Yeah, or they do authorize, and I think provide some guidance for how to weave some of those things in throughout your existing elements. So if you want to explore climate, then we can
It seems
look at
like
that
that's what we talked about last time. I'm trying to think of how.
Yeah, like greenhouse gases show up usually in the land use element and the transportation
Yeah.
element.
Yeah,
So you kind of weave it in, I think that's a great way to kind of do it, instead of
yeah.
try to think about some of those things while you're doing the other parts of the plan.
Yeah, and the other thing that they talk about with the climate change legislation is hazard mitigation planning, which ties into some of the WUI stuff that we were talking about earlier, just being prepared for all kinds of disasters.
That's kind of in my interest, how to be prepared for, you know, not just heat, but fires, rain, or all
Yeah.
these things, and we're talking about how we develop and.
I think the downtown element could very easily be converted into an economic development element. I think there's always a question about where that would go, whether that is better off in the land use section or whether it's better off in the economic development element. So I think there's probably, you know, maybe
Big pieces.
30% more that would need to be added to it to talk about other non-downtown economic development issues like the ag park and the industrial property. I mean, there is a need as part of our assessment, and we've talked about this before, as part of our assessment of the land use, we need to make sure that there are the proper supply and of the different land use types. So single family, multifamily, public and open space, and institutional and industrial, commercial properties, and the West Tenino piece of it has to be adjusted, and so that's going to be a significant change because that West Tenino designation is going to probably be converted to something else.
Yeah, this is, to Dan's point, this is a great opportunity to consider how some of your zoning is applied and the likely development that might happen out there, and if that needs to be adjusted.
So there's some property up against the railroad that is zoned single family, right at the trestle there by Old Highway 99. That property is better used in an industrial, you know, so we would come back and we would work those through with you. The things that we've already heard, one of the public hearing things that we're dealing with in August is a text change to the development regs for height increases in the downtown core. Because right now the heights are 35 feet, and that's a residential standard. That's kind of a basic residential limitation. Downtowns usually are taller than that, so we're presenting a 50-foot, I think it's 50 foot is what the height increase would be. You know, and so things like that, where you're trying to envision what barriers are baked into the code as preventing the type of development and the type of uses that we envision as part of our future. Sometimes parking's raised at that during a comp plan, like you're evaluating whether you're over parked, and how does the development code treat parking standards on a 1 stall per 1,000 square feet of.
So that's when we would address that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
To me, this is just a huge important thing for our city to kind of get that vision of where we want to go. And to me, it's very important that we really try to get it right and really think about how we.
Well, and you want to be strategic about it too, right? I mean, you want to make sure you're capturing your share of the state and federal dollars that are flowing through the system. And Tenino's been pretty good at that,
Yeah,
especially with the parks.
that's kind of why it brought up my mind is downtown development, because there's so many federal dollars coming up, with monies to do those kind of things, and if we don't get them, somebody else is going to get them. So how can we try to make sure we can take advantage of some of those things and have a plan that we can present when there's grant opportunities. We have a good plan in place so we're not scrambling trying to come up with the correct narrative about what we're trying to do.
Yep, and having a strong implementation strategy is
It's a
a
big
really
part,
helpful
yeah.
piece for that too.
Exciting.
Other questions?
Yeah, other stuff.
Comments?
Back to the code. I personally think that's very important. And obviously, with everyone's approval, once the whole process starts, I do think we should allocate some time and money to that. Because just looking at this, like, it's so
spend a lot of money on that too. Most of the codes that we have came from a mix of University Place and Rainier and from the planner from the early 2000s. And then it just got added to sentence at a time sort of since then, I
And
think.
a lot of the code is actually Thurston County standards, especially Public Works' code uses a Thurston County road standard. And they've changed, the county's changed that, and we still reference, I think, one of their older documents, one of their older standards.
That sounds right.
So if you want vertical curb and sidewalk, then you can't get that very easily in the Thurston County code, because that's not what they require from their residential developers. You see them out there as like rolled curbs and swales, grass swales. And so when you look on the new development on Park, right? Is it Park or Central? The one that
Central.
has Central, right? You've got a sidewalk with a grass swale, because if they had an attorney say, look, you guys can't make us do anything else because you adopted, as your standard, the Thurston County standard, and this is what it is. So you're stuck. So if you're not getting what you want, you have to figure out why you're not getting what you want. You have to adjust your code to get what you want. So I think it's, Tenino's been a city for a while, but as far as like growth and sophistication, I think it's probably about time to dial it up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
We could definitely look at some options for that.
Sweet.
All right. Any other questions? When do you think we'll have the stuff for the public hearing next month?
That was the piece that I was remembering that I was gonna work with you on, is we have to post a notice in the newspaper. We need 14 days, so we'll get you a staff report and all those materials at least 14 days prior to the public hearing.
Okay.
So
And what is the public hearing
there
for?
there are two items. There's two separate public hearings. One is the public hearing on the housing action plan, which this body has looked at for a year. It's more gussied up than you've seen it, but it's the same stuff. So I don't know, 42 pages, not including appendices, something like that. That's one public hearing, and then the second public hearing is the code amendment to adjust the heights in downtown for commercial structures, new commercial, from 35 to 50.
Are you expecting either of those to be hot button issues?
Oh, no, I do not.
I don't think so.
Why did we pick 50 out of curiosity? Just because that's
That's about 5 stories.
cities do?
So over 5 stories, your construction style has to change pretty
Oh, I see.
significantly.
Is that as tall as you can make wood framed or something?
It's 3 stick built over up to 2 levels of concrete is
Correct.
typically,
I see.
that fits about within 50.
I see.
Yeah.
A
Now,
little differentiation basically.
so if we change and have a 5-story building, how does that change our fire district needs to be able to service that building?
I don't know. I think that's, I don't know. I'd have to, we distribute the notice to the fire district.
And have them weigh in on it?
Yeah,
Yeah, they want to.
I'm just,
but I don't know.
5 stories, because it's caused some more, typical ladders not gonna go for 5 stories.
right.
Yeah.
So we're getting it down.
Something that's something we should bring up with the.
Who's pushing for the 5-story? Is
One of
there-
the property owners downtown who wants to build something taller.
Let's see. And our job will be to do the public hearing, but not, and decide whether or not we want to push it onto the council or not, or that's done.
Yeah,
What's
so
the
your
purpose?
role will be to host the public for a hearing of their issues. You close the public hearing, then you deliberate, and then you make a recommendation on the code changes to the council. And then the council has the choice of doing the same thing. They can hold another public hearing, or they can just review your recommendation and deliberate and make a decision.
I see.
So It's just when I look around all these beautiful hills, I think, look,
Yeah.
5-story building.
If there was a 5-story building across the street, we wouldn't have any sun on us right now.
I'm just trying to picture 5 stories.
Yeah, it's hard to tell.
And
It's really big.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, that one's, the old yellow hotel is probably 35 feet tall, right? That building right there with the metal roof in the middle of the hardware store,
Yeah,
potentially, I don't know.
I'd say that dug first, probably about